Hi everyone, this is Daryl and welcome back to Book Odyssey. Today I'm going to be reviewing Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I think my job is to solve the Petrova problem. In a small lab, wearing a bedsheet toga, with no idea who I am and no help other than a mindless computer and two mummified roommates. Ryland Grace, a junior high school teacher turned astronaut, is the sole survivor on a desperate last chance mission, and if he fails, humanity and Earth itself will perish. Except that right now, he doesn't know that. He can't even remember his own name, let alone the nature of his assignment or how to complete it. All he knows is that he's been asleep for a long time. He's just woken to find himself millions of miles from Earth, with nothing but two corpses for company. With his crewmates dead and his memory slowly returning, Grace realises that an impossible task now confronts him. Hurtling through space on a tiny ship, it's up to him to puzzle out a seemingly impossible scientific mystery, and divert an extinction-level threat to humanity. And with the clock ticking down and the nearest human being light years away, he's got to do it all alone. Or does he? I looked out at their little faces. In 30 years, they'd all be in their early 40s. They would bear the brunt of it all. And it wouldn't be easy. These kids were going to grow up in an idyllic world and be thrown into an apocalyptic nightmare. They were the generation that would experience the sixth extinction event. I think one of the most important things to say about Project Hail Mary is that it is hard science fiction at its most accessible. Weir manages to take some good old-fashioned sci-fi tropes and turn it into a story that seems to be transcending the dividing line between people who love sci-fi and everyone else who will squint at you and say something like, "Oh, you mean like Star Wars Trek, right?" So good on him for that. I've even had a few friends who are not interested in sci-fi in the slightest tell me that they've been recommended Project Hail Mary by their friends who also aren't interested in sci-fi but loved it. I think there are a few reasons for this, which I'll touch on during the video, starting with a few of the concepts and themes in the book. As far as the concepts go, there are a couple of standouts. Firstly, there's the astrophage, which we quickly discover is an alien microbe that consumes large amounts of a star's energy. This obviously becomes a major problem for the people of Earth when astrophage decides to feast on Sol. The second standout concept centres around the first contact trope, which features heavily in the book. I won't go too much into this here for spoiler reasons, so I'll touch on this more in the spoiler part of the video. Despite these very sci-fi concepts, Weir approaches them in a way that is very grounded, from a hard sci-fi perspective, so that it doesn't require the reader to take many leaps of faith to get on board with what's going on. In fact, on the patented Book Odyssey scale of science fiction hardness, Project Hail Mary ambles along at a pretty solid level 4 Egan effect, but occasionally veers back to level 2 something field generator. Astrophage is one of the few points at which the reader is expected to take a leap of faith, and Weir uses this something field generator device a lot for different purposes, so in essence the book is not crammed full of concepts, a way a lot of sci-fi can be. It uses this one thing ubiquitously, which is done very cleverly. I would certainly class this as hard sci-fi, but not so hard or done in a way that alienates the reader, no matter their level of scientific knowledge. In this respect, Weir truly does make Project Hail Mary accessible, and I think it's great to see harder sci-fi getting the attention and praise that this book has, since it was published in 2021. I'm a scientist! Now we're getting somewhere. Time for me to use science. Alright, genius brain, come up with something. I'm hungry. You have failed me, brain. From a character perspective, we don't have many in the book, at least not compared to a lot of sci-fi I've read, but there are a couple of characters that are very memorable. Let's talk about our protagonist for a second. Grace is a likeable guy and I quickly found myself rooting for him. He's the type of character that is very easy to root for most of the time, if you can just get over the fact that, on reflection, he's not that interesting. He has a couple of moments where he acts like a typical human being, but for a lot of the time you might think of him as a bit of a Gary Sue. This isn't really helped by some of Weir's expletive language choices for him. We're faced with a lot of goshes and gollies, which at first makes him come across as older than the character actually is. This wasn't really a problem for me when reading the book because it becomes clear pretty much right away that this isn't a character-led story. It's a concept and science-led story, and as far as the characters go in order to drive these, Grace was perfectly serviceable, and like I said, he's likeable, so it was all good. In terms of his function as a character, we're presented with a first-person narrative, which was a great choice by Weir because it means the reader only ever knows what the character knows, and leads to some unreliable narrative moments because of Grace's memory loss. I found he was much more successful at being a narrator than an interesting character, with his sense of humour setting the tone for the whole novel, making it generally a fun read and kind of reminiscent of John Scalzi. One character I did find extremely interesting and entertaining was Eva Straat, a Dutch woman who works for the UN and who has been given absolute authority to stop astrophage, leading to the Hail Mary mission. Her deadpan interactions with Grace were some of the highlights of the book for me. On the writing, Weir put together a well-crafted story with plenty of lows to offset the highs, giving it a real sense of raising the stakes with a couple of twists in there that had the intended impact. So now I'm going to go into a bit more spoiler territory here. If you don't want to watch this, you can skip ahead to the time at the bottom of the video to get my final thoughts and my star rating. As I mentioned earlier, there are two big concepts in Project Hail Mary. I covered the astrophage in the non-spoiler part, but I'd like to take a bit more time to talk about the second, the first contact trope. As far as this trope goes, there were a couple of things I really liked about how Weir approached it. Firstly, it didn't fall into the very overdone narrative of aliens equals bad equals war. In fact, as far as First Contact goes, taking the astrophage out of the equation, humanity couldn't have asked for better, really. The second thing I really appreciated was the level of effort that Weir went to in order to have a physiologically plausible intelligent alien life form that actually took into account the environment of its homeworld and evolution. It goes way back to how Weir manages to take a harder sci-fi approach and yet also manages to make it really accessible. Granted, there were a few times where I was proverbially scratching my head, but that's on me, not on Weir. And as we're talking about aliens, I'd like to say that for me, Rocky made this book. What a great idea to make this First Contact story and turn it into what is essentially a buddy comedy. It completely elevated my enjoyment of this book. I actually just go around asking people to fist my bump now. Now, I don't know if you're aware, but me and BookBot 5000 have a bit of a buddy comedy thing going ourselves, don't we, BookBot?
Death to humans.
He doesn't mean that. He's just upset because he thought that Rocky was going to turn out to be a robot.
What?
I'm sorry, I mean an inorganic life form. Anyway, when it became clear Rocky wasn't a robot, he began rooting for the astrophage.
Your flesh is so fragile. It tears like paper.
Thanks, BookBot. That's terrifying. Anyway, let's talk about the ending. As far as endings go, I liked it. While we get an idea that the Earth is likely to have been saved, we also know that nothing will be the same for humanity. Ironically, because of astrophage, we know that we have a neighbour in the galaxy, and it leaves us wondering about what this might mean for humanity. I also really appreciated the fact that Weir draws on the similarities between humans and the Iridians by having Grace end pretty much in the exact same place as where he began, teaching, but instead of teaching young humans, he's teaching young Idirans. Project Hail Mary is one of the most accessible hard science fiction books I've read, and because of this I would highly recommend it to not only established sci-fi fans, but for those looking for a gateway book into the genre, or even those who find themselves drawn to more contemporary fiction. The concepts are intelligent and scientifically robust, the story is compelling, and the characters are entertaining, if sometimes a little less multifaceted than I personally like my characters. Is it mind-blowing? No, not really. But I was thoroughly entertained all the way through, and it presented me with enough science to allow me the illusion of feeling a little bit smarter after having read it. So with that in mind, I gave Project Hail Mary 4.5 stars out of 5. I'd also like to say that I have high hopes for this book regarding this year's Science Fiction Literary Awards. That's it for this video. Please like, subscribe and comment in all the usual ways. It really goes a long way to supporting the channel. Thanks for watching guys, and as always, happy reading.